Thanks for tuning into another edition of Another Dolphins podcast. I've been waiting so long to say this, but game day is back at Hard Rock Stadium. The Miami Dolphins are hosting the Atlanta Falcons. Check your pulse if you are not fired up. Disclaimer, it is the preseason, so your pulse should still be kind of okay. But Joshua Houtz, that is apart from the point. How you doing today, my friend?
I'm wonderful, man. We've been waiting for this. It feels like it took forever to get here. Now we finally have football back in our lives. Even if we're probably not going to see Tua Tagovailoa tonight, many of our starters, it's just football. And, we eat and live this stuff. We love seeing these, feel-good stories, watching them progress throughout training camp and seeing what they can do when the games matter. So, stoked. Check your pulse if you're not fired up.
3 years into the Mike McDaniel era, Josh, and the starters just don't really play too much in the preseason. How do you feel about that?
I like it. As a fan, we all want to see, Tua go out there maybe and play his 2 quarters or Tyreek Hill. But we got to realize this is a, what is it? It's not a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's a race or a marathon, whatever that saying is. You know what I'm saying? We got to worry about our key players that keep them healthy, and that's all that really matters. So it sucks, for those fans that maybe are going there to watch the games that don't get to see some of these prolific players. But yeah, put them in a box. We know what they can do. We don't need to see them until regular season, although we probably will, right, Jake? At least at some point this preseason.
Priority number one is staying healthy. And Mike McDaniel, he's pretty tough to read when it comes to injuries. Sometimes you'll get a little bit of hey, hopefully we'll see him back in a week. Other times it's, yeah, maybe he'll come back. And next thing you know, it's been 4 months. So, Josh, I think, though, as we enter this game against the Falcons, all eyes are on the joint practices. 1, to get some exciting highlights, of course, but 2, for the love of God, Dolphins, just stay healthy. And there were a couple bumps and bruises. Jalen Waddle wasn't practicing. Braxton Berrios wasn't practicing. Aaron Brewer left practice with which looked like a hand injury. Josh, do you think we need to spend any time or too much time on any of these? It kind of seems like it's just going through the motions at this point. I'm not super concerned about any of these injuries and week 1 availability. Anything. It's too early, I think, to worry about that stuff.
Yeah, I'm trying not to get doom and gloom over the Aaron Brewer thing, although, like we'll talk about, I am just a little bit queasy and want to see the way some of those other guys play. But it's early, man. I would much rather, like we said, sit here and put these guys in a box, let them be healthy for when the games matter. So nothing to worry about yet. But like you said, Mike McDaniel and the way he words these things, if we're talking about this 2 weeks from now, then maybe it's time to get a little bit worried.
I didn't know it was possible to speak in jigsaw puzzle, but Mike McDaniel has absolutely mastered that. But today, we are going to go through some of the key players to follow as Miami takes the field for the first time this season. And Josh, I think when we were building our list, it was kind of under the impression of, so the starters won't be playing. We aren't really going to be hipsters in this, I don't think. We're not going to be looking at guys who are number 90 on the depth chart. I think we're really going to lock in here, whether it's guy 40 through 60, as the Dolphins start, cutting down the roster. And it's important to keep in mind here that unlike past years, and it's actually been this way for a couple of years now, where there aren't, what was it, Josh, 2 or 3 different cut down days throughout August, but now it's just one cut down day before week 1. Let's get started. Let's jump right into it. Who's number 5 for you, Josh? Let's start at the guys you're excited for all of them, but let's end with your most excited.
So you want the player I'm most excited about right now?
No,
most excited?
Okay.
All right. So then for me, trying to decide. Do you have yours listed better? Because I have just a bunch of players, and I'm not even sure which would be my 5. Do you have a 5? Like
number 5? Both of us, neither of us are in South Florida for training camp. It's always a bummer, but I'm ready to see what all the noise about Quentin Bell is about. This is someone who it seems like in the past 2 weeks has really just stirred up the pot. He is the starting outside linebacker on Miami's first depth chart. Now, it's important to keep in mind that depth chart doesn't include the likes of Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips who are working back from injuries. But what I think we see with someone like Quentin Bell is the benefit of having a relaxed rules for the practice squad. This is somebody who's only played 9 games in his career, but he was a 7th round draft pick in the 2019 NFL draft. He's been around the league for so long, hanging around different practice squads, bounced from the Raiders to the Bucks to the Falcons and the Eagles before finding himself in Miami. He signed to the practice squad in the middle of last year, so they've really been focused on developing Bell into a player. And Josh, this is going to be our first chance to see, did he get some good reps in training camp, or is this someone who's going to take this opportunity he has and ride the lightning?
Yeah, and I mean, again, we're not there, but by all accounts, everyone is gushing over what he's done this offseason. It sounds like this is a guy you just don't count out, right? He has an opportunity here with Miami. We know we need that pass rusher early on, and we're not going to dive into the depth chart too much, but we'll talk about throughout this pod. And he is listed opposite of Emmanuel Ogbah in that number 1 depth chart. So definitely excited to see where he plays. Definitely seems like he has a chip on his shoulder, and seems like he's absolutely been, catching the eye of everyone there at camp. I try to go through and try to, arrange mine. So I'm going to go with number 5, Jake. And I think it's the guy that we both probably have on this list. But for me, it's Jalen Wright. I mean, the Miami Dolphins, we know what Devon Achane can do, right? We know he's going to have a bigger role. We know what Raheem Mostert can do, even Jeff Wilson to an extent. I want to see what the Dolphins see in Jalen Wright, his skill set, how they utilize it. Because at the end of the day, right, they traded up to get this guy. So they had a plan in mind. This is a guy who, I've seen the pictures, is this J.J. 2.0. I talked about how he's effective as a pass blocker, but how is his role going to be in that running game this season, right? I mean, we play fantasy football. If you're in a redraft league, you're probably not going to get Jalen Wright, but in Dynasty, I've already drafted him. I'm sure you drafted him in Dynasty, and it might not be the year, but you're going to put him on layaway for a long-term plan. So just to see a little bit of that shiftiness, I know I'm going to love to put together every touch from Jalen Wright's rookie game or whatever it is. So that's the player that first stuck out in my mind. And again, all these guys that we're going to talk about is a hair, like they're neck and neck. But Jalen Wright, man, pretty stoked for what he can bring to the table. And again, what Mike McDaniel has in mind for him moving forward.
He was number 3 for me. I got greedy. Dynasty football. I have him and Raheem Mostert. How quickly can we see Jalen Wright have a really, really big role on this offense? Will it be in year 1? It's important to keep in mind this is someone the Dolphins traded next year's 3rd-round pick for to move up. 4th-round selection. I think it was pick 120 overall. He was the 5th running back selected. And Devon Achane gave him some praise recently, saying, I told him he's doing better than I was doing as far as camp-wise, picking up stuff pretty fast. He's learning, and he's a quick learner. See me last year, it was kind of hard for me during this part of camp. It got easier for me as I got into the season, but I've told him, man, you're a quick learner. How reasonable, Josh, would it be to kind of want someone like Jalen Wright to really stick out on the football field? This is someone you're thinking is going to get, 15 touches maybe. That's probably a little crazy now that I say it out loud. But looking at the depth chart here, running back, it starts with Mostert and Achane. Salvon Ahmed and Jeff Wilson are your 2A and 2B there. And then you got Jalen Wright as a 3rd stringer. Is there an opportunity here where we could kind of sit back in the second half and just based on this depth chart, sit back and see him be that guy to carry most of the workload for the 3rd and 4th quarters?
Yeah, probably. And maybe that's the way they planned this. Because, I mean, looking at that depth chart, it is loaded. But, I mean, I guess they'll just have the veterans up there because it seems to me like Jalen Wright by the end of the year is probably going to be RB3 maybe. But, it's intriguing to see what he's going to bring to the table. And, again, what he can do in that live reps. Because here in Devon Achane, again, a guy who, as everything that we talked about, all the accolades, what he was on pace to do, the over 8 yards per touch. I mean, to hear him say that, he's Jalen Wright's further along than he was last year, and we knew what he did in this offense. I mean, that's got to give you a little bit of pause and make you wonder, what magic tricks Mike McDaniel might have up his sleeves.
137 rushing attempts for 1,013 rushing yards last year at Tennessee, 7 yards per carry for Jalen Wright in his final year in college. Josh, considering the draft capital the Dolphins used to go up and select Wright, where do you think there would be kind of that point of no return where fans would be like a little annoyed with this pick, depending on where that depth chart is come week 1? Who would he need to be in front of?
I don't know, man. With this fan base, it could be anybody, right? I mean, the thing I would say is that you just got to temper your expectations. I wouldn't put too much thought into the depth chart. I'm thinking he's probably going to be behind Jeff Wilson and maybe RB4. But again, this is a long-term plan in this offense. Raheem Mostert's not getting younger. Wilson, we've talked about times maybe being expendable, but if you keep him around, how long is he going to be here? So Achane, Wright, that is obviously, the tandem of the future, but I would not be worried at all if he's RB4 on the depth chart. I just cannot imagine him keeping any more, right? If you throw Alec Ingold into the mix.
So he'll be competing against Salvon Ahmed and Chris Brooks for snaps here for the majority of the preseason. And yeah, that's going to be one of those players where it's going to be kind of easy to just look in the backfield every play. Is this somebody who's going to get the ball? And then, we can get into the debates of, is he looking great even if the offensive line, knowing this Miami Dolphins offensive line, does struggle a little bit. Joshua Houtz, who do you got? Actually, I will give you my number 4 since you countered me with Jalen right there. So number 4, how about Malik Washington? Is there going to be a slingshot here, a slingshot effect when you consider you don't have Odell Beckham out there? We mentioned Braxton Berrios banged up a little bit. Jalen Waddle banged up a little bit. We have Malik Washington catching passes from both Skylar Thompson and Mike White. Could this be something, Josh? He plays pretty well in the preseason, and all of a sudden we're feeling maybe wide receiver 3 come opening day? Is that possible if Odell Beckham isn't looking 100% yet?
I mean, anything's possible, but that might be a little bit crazy with how, River Craycraft sounds like he's almost nearly unstoppable. But I'm glad you brought up Malik Washington. He was one of those guys I had as an alternative just in case we didn't touch on him. We previously had hoped to come on here with Kat and break this down. But I mean, he's that 6th round pick that a lot of people cannot believe went where he did. A lot of people are excited to see what he can do in the Miami Dolphins offense. So I think Odell Beckham Jr., there's something there that, maybe isn't right. Maybe if River Craycraft, something happens there, he could sneak in there at wide receiver 3, but I don't think to start the season he will be.
Mike McDaniel said, what Malik has done really well is find how to be a professional very quickly. He's operating as a vet would in terms of how he's studying, his ownership of the playbook, and how reliable he is. Malik Washington is coming in to be an absolute leader, and I'm interested to see where does that coach stop, because Mike McDaniel can sit here and praise him, but there are 8 wide receivers ahead of him currently on the depth chart. Willie Snead the 4th, Braylon Sanders, and Eric Ezukama, who hasn't even been practicing recently. So is he someone who, again, second half, we're going to see him get a majority of the workload? What can it look like if he is that featured wide receiver? And something else to consider, too, how good is Miami's rushing attack? Can Malik Washington have a role in the rushing game when you consider he's a 5'9" wide receiver? What can he be as a blocker? I think that'll be something to keep your eyes on as well.
Yeah, and a shout out. I think it was Wingfield might have said that he had a nice block in one of the joint practices. So intrigued to see what Malik Washington does. I think we talked about and joked that this kind of seems like another almost that next Jarvis Landry that could be lingering around, that slot receiver that has just the dog in him. So excited to see what he can bring. We know he led the entire college football nationally in receptions last year, right? So dude can definitely go out there and produce. Jake, for me, again, I'm sitting here trying to rummage through this. I was trying to sort it out nicely, but I went number 4, and again, he's probably higher up on the list, but I want to see what Patrick Paul can do. I mean, we joke about the face mask and, but he's 6'7", right? We hear that he's holding his own throughout camp, throughout the joint practices, things like that. Teron Armstead, is there going to be a time throughout the year where we're worried about him? Most likely, right? So how far along is Patrick Paul? How's he looking his first live action? And is he that behemoth? Does he look as
he is.
Is he further? Yeah, he's definitely a behemoth. But is he further along than maybe we anticipated when they drafted him? Because we're, again, Malik Washington, Jalen Wright, some of these guys we're not necessarily relying on this year. They're more of a long-term fits here. So let's see what Patrick Paul can do. He was number 4 on my list, but again, could probably be a little bit higher up.
I did not have Patrick Paul on my list, surprisingly enough. And you make a great point based on what we've been reading, the tweets. Paul's looked pretty good as a rookie second-round pick. He's currently 2nd on the depth chart behind Teron Armstead. And the big question is going to be, how early will we have to see Patrick Paul thrown into action? But Josh, early on, man, I completely agree with you. When you consider you got Mike White, Skylar Thompson, 2 right-handed quarterbacks, you're going to need that blind side protected. And if you see nothing happening on that left side of the offensive line, Patrick Paul is going to get most of the reps here. Yeah, I think you'll see some Ryan Hayes, last year's 7th-round pick, went to Arizona for a bit, ended up on the practice squad. But for the most part, Friday night, we're going to see a lot of Patrick Paul. For the film heads, this is going to be an absolutely great 4 quarters of football. So, Josh, I really like that pick.
Thanks, man. And I hope that, we don't overreact, right? Again, this guy was quoted as a project. So let's give him some time. Let's not overreact if he gets beat on a play here or there. But I had to make sure Patrick Paul is out there because long-term, he could absolutely be what we're hoping, right? Long-term, Patrick Paul on one side, Austin Jackson on the other.
And it kind of goes into the same bucket as Quentin Bell in the sense that, is this been head-to-head hype in the sense of maybe you've been able to get some easier matchups just based on your style of play, based on how the Dolphins are built on the other side of the football. Is Patrick Paul playing better because the Miami Dolphins are working with a couple younger edge rushers, some guys that are really trying to refine their game? That's what is really exciting about these preseason games and what we're hoping to learn throughout the 4 quarters on Friday night. Josh, my number 3 player was Jalen Wright, so I'm going to just go ahead and push it right back to you.
We're playing Uno with each other, right? So this one might be the one that we had the same. So this might be a little clip, right? So number 3, Jake, again, Quentin Bell was a guy that I had as a alternate, thought maybe that he could be on this list as well. But Chop Robinson, man, we've continued to hear how dominant he has been. We hear about that first step. I think one of the most exciting things we heard all camp, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was not a video of Chop Robinson where he lined up inside and beat the center, right? We heard about it, but we did not see a video because I'm just starting to get dreams back, like just starting to remember dreams. And I woke up thinking I saw this, and it was not. We did not see that, right? No one posted that. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, I'm excited to see what Chop Robinson does in live action. We know, again, the edge position, how important we're going to need some of these guys to step up. The Dolphins had a vision in mind. I know a lot of people are throwing out the Micah Parsons comparison. So let's ride, baby. Let's see what Chop Robinson can do, Jake. But I do think that was a player that you also had on your list, right?
Chop Robinson was number 2 for me, but Josh, I need to hear more about this. You just like woke up in the middle of the night and was like, you had like a film breakdown or like a TikTok going through your head of a Chop Robinson breaking through the middle?
I don't know. It was a fan camera and everything. It looked like it was shot from the sideline. Like, and I don't know. It's weird because I do not remember many dreams. And over the last few weeks, they're starting to come back. And this one was just one that was very vivid. And I'm like, oh shit, I saw that and woke up. Nope, you didn't see that, Houtz. Wasn't real.
Oh man, I love that though. I love that. I'm inspired because the Dolphins are going to need so much help at edge rusher with Andrew Van Ginkel gone, with the injuries to Phillips and Chubb. Can Chop Robinson really step in? And Josh, like, think about the last 3 years. Think about the start of the Mike McDaniel era. We haven't really gotten a lot of excitement from the rookie players. Devon Achane was absolutely incredible last year, but you think about Channing Tindall was your first draft pick 2 years ago. We haven't really heard much from him. It's actually been kind of disappointing that we haven't really seen him make any noise at linebacker. Last year,
Omar said nope. Sorry, did you hear Omar? He just said nope. I'm like, any good or bad? He's just like, nope. And I'm like, oh man, shot to the heart.
You can't even hit it with like a well actually or something. Just the peace sign in the at the end of nope. Just that's so demoralizing. But that's back-to-back years where you had Channing Tindall and Cam Smith, where that first year, that rookie season, it was like, all right, we got to kind of wait. We got to trust the process. And the trusting the process hasn't really been working out. So for me, man, it's really seeing, can Chop Robinson come in and maybe not be a playmaker day one, but if he can come in and have those few impact plays, whether it's lining up over center, whether the Dolphins have a specific plan on how to use him, will be what I'm looking to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we got to, if you're just lined up over center, I mean, what's he going to do when you need him to spy Josh Allen? I think that's something that we kind of touched on and things like that. So this guy is an all-around player. We know he has that elite first step. His production wasn't quite there his senior year, but I'm excited, man, to see him explode off the line, get a sack. Could you imagine? I mean, we're all going to be absolutely losing our mind. Kids are dropping toys. They're stoked.
So he's listed behind Emmanuel Ogbah and Bell early on that first depth chart. He's only 21 years old, and Lance Zierlein did compare him to Micah Parsons. So, Josh, what would that stat line have to be on Friday night for us to be really feeling like we got the second coming of Micah Parsons here?
Man, I think a couple quarterback pressures, he's going to probably get a sack. And then, I mean, are we going to get a forced fumble too? I mean, Micah Parsons is one of the great, he is an elite player at the position. So to just hear him even in the same breath, besides being from Penn State, I mean, I literally think they're breeding them up there. So I think a sack, couple pressures, and maybe a forced fumble, that'll get us all hyped.
Were you disappointed to not see him as one of the starters on the depth chart? I mean, I'm going through it there. That kind of felt like maybe the biggest surprise. Malik Washington being like the 9th, 10th wide receiver was kind of a surprise. But outside of that, I mean, seeing maybe it's him being a rookie, so you make Chop Robinson a second stringer. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the first thing I see is it's probably just a veteran thing, right? Maybe they want to see these rookies, how they compete. They're got guys like Bell who's just absolutely playing out of his mind, Ogbah, who has the familiarity. So I'm not sure. Let's just hope that we see that name continue to rise up the list. And you mentioned it, 21 years old. We don't need Chop Robinson we do need Chop Robinson to come on early, don't we? I was going to say we don't, but we need him absolutely without Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb. So it sounds like it could be a cheat code, though, once this thing's healthy. I mean, we talked about him lining up inside. Remember when Jalen Phillips would line up over a guard? He was almost unstoppable. Mm-hmm. And then you got God, I'm getting giddy.
Grayson Murphy, Mohamed Kamara, a couple other names to watch there at edge rusher. And this is going to be one of the biggest positions to follow throughout camp, because I really think this could be a scenario where you maybe see the most sway over the next few weeks. And it's important to keep in mind too, Josh, we could see a scenario where the Dolphins got all the information they needed from joint practices, and they're just kind of watching the game and decide at the end of the game, all right, it was just a little more data onto the spreadsheet.
Are we good to stop there and just go on to the next?
I don't think we're going to be seeing much Bijan Robinson from the Atlanta Falcons, but Josh, Tyler Algier is a pretty good backup running back for the Falcons. I think they're going to use him a lot during the year. That would be an interesting scenario. How well can Tyler Algier kind of escape the Grayson Murphys, the Mohamed Kamaras, and even the Chop Robinsons?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things you really want to see out of him still. I mean, it was one of those things that we said about Jalen Phillips early on. How would he set up against run? He wasn't very good at, containing the edge. That was a part of his game that he had to work on. He was upset that he had to come off the field. That was a similar thing with Chop Robinson, right? He's a little bit better at setting the edge, things like that. But yeah, man, that's a very good Atlanta Falcons run game. That's a very good Atlanta Falcons team from top to bottom. And we get to see Michael Penix Jr. So let's see him pressure the heck out of him. So yeah, I'm intrigued to see how these young players who we're going to need to rely on more than expected, how they can go out there, set the edge, how they can stop a potent offense, as much as they can be in preseason, like the Atlanta Falcons.
I appreciate you going Jalen Phillips, the positive side, and not Charles Harris, who, I mean, I don't know if I can keep making the jabs at Charles Harris, because I think he's actually still in the league somehow, making a name for himself. So shout out him. But Josh, if you see if you see Chop Robinson in that first and second quarter being a 3-down player, I think that's an exciting sign. If you see that, unless the Falcons then go out and average like 12 yards a carry, then it's a disaster.
Yeah, it's just nice that we have, we mentioned Bell being up there at top, Agba. It's nice that behind them are all these younger players, right, that are going to be hungry, and we're going to be able to see a lot of them. We're going to see a lot of Chop Robinson, I think, and Grayson Murphy. I mean, you touched on him. That's your darling. You talked about him all off season long, and you even kind of threw out a little Channing Tindall tease earlier. I mean, is he going to do anything this year? Absolutely not.
Real quick, Josh, just because we've seen him working out on the sidelines a bit, just gearing up for the season, gut check, how you feeling about Jalen Phillips to the pup? Do you think he's going to be someone who's going to be ready to start opening day, or maybe away for 4 to 6 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, I'm praying that he is. I think this defense will be a lot different. But again, I think the Dolphins have shown time and time again that they're kind of a little bit safe and cautious on that side of things. So we're talking about all these players. We're going to see over these next few weeks if they truly need Jalen Phillips out there. But I'm hoping he's ready to go, and maybe it's just a precaution thing. But I think he will end up on the PUP list. Hoping I'm wrong, though.
I'm right there with you. I mean, I get caught being the positive Dolphin fan all the time, but that's just one scenario where I go back to how safe Mike McDaniel is with everyone, how he refuses to set timelines and different things like that, where it'll be tough to see a scenario where Jalen Phillips convinces him. I'd love to be wrong, but that's just kind of what we've been learning about the trends of the Mike McDaniel era. Number 1 on my list, Josh, you mentioned Michael Penix, and the Falcons signed Kirk Cousins to a monster 3-year deal where I think he's getting $45 million per year. But they also drafted a quarterback in the top 10 of the 2024 NFL draft. So I think that we're going to see a lot of Michael Penix Jr. just for the Falcons to get some film on him, to really have an idea of what they're working with if Kirk Cousins is going to be the starter. And on the other side, I go back to the idea that we haven't been in Miami. What do you think it would have been like to see Ethan Bonner, who is tied with Storm Duck for number 1 on my list? I did them both. I cheated. Ethan Bonner got into a fight with Drake London, man. Talk about the preseason. That is awesome.
I mean, I'd be marking out. I'd be yelling, chanting, Bonner. I don't know. I would lose it if I saw it. We need some evidence of that, because, I mean, think that there was a scuffle, and then we first hear it's Ethan Bonner. We're like, oh man, this dude has come to play. So, Cam Smith was the one that had that gift going around. Just drop your nuts. It sounds like Ethan Bonner has done all of that this offseason. So, he's definitely a feel good story. I tried to go back because someone posted a picture of it was like a long time ago. It was a white goat, like a baby white goat, and I put Ethan Bonner starting opposite Jalen Ramsey week 1, and the dude it like blew up, and the dude deleted the video. So all I have is just me with an asshole text. So I might retweet that if he's starting. Hope that isn't the case, but we're going to see a lot of Ethan Bonner and some of these younger corners. And dude, he's been stepping up, at least from all the ongoers in attendance.
I was a little disappointed. Cam Smith, he suffered an injury early in training camp. I think he came out for practice. He was doing warm-ups, and then he didn't make it through the warm-ups, went back inside, and that was it. So, Josh, the Dolphins are going to need options on the outside. Kader Kohou's listed as a starting nickelback. Nick Needham as the backup nickel cornerback. So that gives you a great opportunity for Ethan Bonner, and I'm going to say it, Storm Duck, to be those guys on the boundary moving forward behind Kendall Fuller, behind Jalen Ramsey. I know they're going to need depth. And Kendall Fuller gave some praise to Ethan Bonner, calling him a complete football player. Josh, we talked so much about how the Dolphins have all the speed on the offensive side of the football, but the entire time it was Tyreek, it was HM. They were saying that, hey, don't sleep on Ethan Bonner.
And that's crazy. I'm stoked to see if he can put it all together because it's such a feel good story. It's the fact that he goes out there and grinds, day in and day out. I just hope that we're talking about this secondary, man. I just hope that we're not, sitting here worried about how it looks. A couple guys get injured, man. This is not looking great. I mean, especially Kendall Fuller's been a little bit banged up. It doesn't sound like that's anything serious, but oh man, I just hope that's never a problem. So yes, Ethan Bonner Island. Let's see it. Cam Smith, huge disappointment though.
That's why I have these guys listed as number one for me. I think we're going to see a lot of Ethan Bonner. We're going to see a lot of Storm Duck. And if we see a lot of them chasing the football, I'm going to be super queasy entering the season. There's a lot on the line here for this Miami Dolphins secondary, and they're going to need one of these guys, Ethan Bonner or Storm Duck, to step up. It's really hard to kind of separate your stuff from the training camp hype we've been hearing over the last couple months or month or so, but this will be a great opportunity. The Falcons are going to want to throw the football. They're going to want to see what Michael Penix can do, and that'll be Ethan Bonner's Storm Duck on the other side being put to the test.
Yeah, and another name just throw out there, shout out Cat. I think he mentioned Isaiah Johnson when we did some of our 53-man roster breakdowns. So that's another young rookie that, from Syracuse that could end up, maybe sticking depending on what the Dolphins need there in the secondary. So definitely something to look at. You could even go into the safeties if we really wanted to with Poyer out and things like that. But someone needs to step up, right, Jake? We need to see someone step up. If Ethan Bonner was your first, though, Jake, you ready for mine? Because I kind of lumped an entire unit in together. I was sitting here trying to figure out who to pick out, and then I'm like, dude, you're pretty much talking about the entire interior part of the offensive line, and it really comes out with Aaron Brewer, right? I mean, we signed Aaron Brewer, and I cannot continue to get Brian Baldinger, Jake. We had him on the podcast. I cannot get that out of our mind when he said how he was a little bit hesitant to think that was our starting center. We know there have been some errant snaps here. Now he's banged up. The only players behind him, I think Liam Eichenberg is penciled in there, but on the depth chart, we got Andrew Meyer, the acorn from UTEP, and Sean Harlow, the vet that they just signed. So who's going to step up and take some of those snaps at center? What is truly happening there at that position? And then if you're going to have Liam Eichenberg taking these valuable snaps at center, that's taking him away from guard, where he's still learning how to become a suitable guard. So a lot of disarray in there in the middle of that Dolphins offensive line. And I'm intrigued to see the way it kind of pulls itself together and hopefully figures itself out. Because for as much as we sit here and say, in Butch Barry we trust, we love to throw out that Tua, getting the ball out and point to, whatever it was. We're doing that because we're trying to mask the offensive line. So I'm praying something comes together and somebody steps up.
It does feel like if you could somehow turn musical chairs into a game of dominoes where they're just all collapsing on each other, because that's what happens. We see Aaron Brewer leave practice. All of a sudden you have Liam Eichenberg walk right over and start snapping balls to Tua. It's not Meyer. It's not Harlow. So I'm just so curious, like you, Josh, just to kind of see what's the full plan, because the Dolphins had 14 different starting offensive lines last year. I think it was actually 13. The Jets were number one with 14. Sorry about that. But can they really just get guys who can be out there? The best ability is availability. The opening depth chart had Robert Jones as the left guard, Brewer at center, and Liam Eichenberg at the right guard. Josh, are you feeling like that could be the opening day lineup, or you think there's going to be some movement there?
I mean, I was hoping to see more of a battle with those guard spots, right? It almost seems like they're just kind of copy and pasting from last year, but liked what we saw at Rob Jones. So I'd be okay if that were the case. But again, we need to get this situated. We cannot have Aaron Brewer banged up, cannot have Liam Eichenberg snapping balls. And it's crazy, for someone that, doesn't necessarily have a home on the offensive line, you can kind of see how it would almost crumble without him out there.
Keon Smith sliding in and being a backup left guard, I thought was pretty interesting. Jack Driscoll, the backup right guard currently. Lester Cotton's listed as a third stringer. And if you want to spin zone the idea of hope, that's someone who started a playoff game that's sitting there as a third stringer. So they're really leaning into the idea of hopefully developing these guys. Josh, do you have the depth chart up right now?
I actually dipped from it. Well, what question were you going to ask me? Because I want to look up Isaiah Johnson. I want to make sure I had his name right. All right,
I was going to ask, who do you see making some of the biggest leaps in terms of this depth chart from week 1 to week 2? I instantly go to Malik Washington. I mean, I see Braylon Sanders ahead of him, Anthony Schwartz. Those are two guys right there where the best way they could make me eat crow, they have that big playmaking ability. So maybe a 60, 70-yard touchdown bomb from a Mike White, a Skylar Thompson, something like that. But I really expect to see Malik Washington to, have a huge leap on the depth chart after 1 week.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it. I was going to joke maybe Jalen Wright, but he's not going to leap up there, really. So, oh, man. Malcolm Perry? Can I go with Malcolm? I don't know, man. I'm let's stick with what I was going to say. I'm going to say Jalen Wright's going to jump up a little bit, and I was even going to have Skylar Thompson. He was a guy that I had written down as someone I wanted to watch. We keep hearing there's a battle there. So is he going to leapfrog Mike White? I mean, again, that's not a substantial leap. So I kind of punked out a little bit here, Jake, but I like the fact that there are so many different options. And yeah, Malik Washington, that's the answer right there.
Are you surprised to hear there's a quarterback battle a little bit? We haven't talked too much about this because I think Friday will be a good chance to see it. If you decided to move on from Mike White, you could save close to $5 million. Do you think we could finally see the scenario where Skylar Thompson has shown enough? He's been here for 3 years. Hey, I'm good to be the backup, and maybe the Dolphins bring in another 7th round, Luke Folk, Brandon Doughty, somebody else to kind of be that practice squad QB?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see it. I mean, that's kind of why it's so intriguing, right? Because Mike White has been that vet. We've seen him start around the league, but Skylar Thompson, he kind of looked okay his rookie year. You saw a little bit of promise. I keep joking. It's a whole different player with that visor on. So I want to see if he's wearing that visor. And again, I want to see what he does because we all remember those highlights from Eric Ezukama. A lot of those were coming from Skylar Thompson, right? A lot of those were that preseason god. So it'd be awesome to see him be able to make Mike White expendable. I just don't know with Tua's history, things like that, if you would truly want to, not keep all three like we talked about before. But yeah, hell yeah, man. Skylar Thompson pushing it. I love to see it.
Last position here, Josh, before we wrap up, like I said, the cornerbacks was my go-to. I think we're going to see a lot of them on film. But what do you make of this tight end depth chart? There's 6 of them. Durham Smythe listed as the 1, Jonnu Smith, Julian Hill, Jody Fortson, Tanner Connor. Then you got the undrafted rookie Ricci to line out the group. How much shuffling you see there after 1 week? Any?
Yeah, I mean, I think those first 3, I think I'm starting to become more positive. Those are going to be the 3 that make the roster. And then after that, maybe they keep a Fortson. I know you like the promise that we heard early on. We've all been stoked about Tanner Connor. So are those guys legit? I guess that's what I want to see. I want to see which of those guys, step up and prove that they're legit. I think having a couple guys on the team said Julian Hill's like the baddest like tight end in the league or something like that. So good Lord. So yes, let's see what these guys can do. Fortson, Tanner Connor there, that similar mold, maybe more of a pass catcher. Yeah, I don't know that anybody's really going to shoot up there, to answer your question in a lot of words.
I think that's where the line is in terms of the 53-man roster. I think Julian Hill has a great opportunity to make it. The Dolphins did find a way to keep 5 tight ends back in 2022, only 2 to begin the year, last year being Smythe and Hill. Jody Fortson, man, I think he's either going to make the roster or he's not. That sounds really dumb, but what I mean by that is he's either going to have a great preseason where I think he becomes that red zone, that monster target in the red zone that the Dolphins offense could use, where he can kind of be a little bit of a game breaker so we can kind of escape the fades to Tyreek Hill a little bit. or he's not going to be able to do too much and he's not going to really stand out, and the decision's going to be a little simpler. So I think it's either going to be he's going to have a monster preseason, especially in the red zone, or he might get lost in the shuffle a little bit. It's either one of the extremes, I think, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, no, completely makes sense. And I want to throw the linebacking unit out there. I keep talking about Channing Tindall, but, we joked Zeke Vandenberg in the past. He's starting to step up. We hear him making plays. I think Duke Riley's banged up, Anthony Walker a little bit there. So these guys are going to have some of those younger players really have to step up. So do any of those show any sort of promise? And then last thing about this depth chart, Jake, Last thing about this depth chart, Jake, do you see down here at kick returner, they have Devon Achane listed next to Braxton Berrios. So what are they devising there in Danny Crossman's room? That's what I would wonder.
I wonder how long we're going to have to wait and see. Is this going to be a coaching staff that is so fearful about the injuries that they kind of avoid using Achane and Tyreek Hill and all those guys on the depth chart? And this is something too that the Dolphins are doing a great job of not showing their hand. I'm actually a little surprised they put Achane down there because they don't have to. Like we mentioned that Liam Eichenberg instantly started playing center. He's not listed on the depth chart as a center. So interesting, Josh. I think that might be something that maybe the Dolphins have maybe already decided that it's going to be Berrios and Achane if they're saying that. Otherwise, I don't know why you'd show your hand with something like that.
Yeah, then after it's Anthony Schwartz, Malik Washington, and McGowan. So it almost seems like, it would be Berrios and Achane as the season starts, but maybe we'll.
Who knows, man? But that is it. That is all the time we have today on Another Dolphins podcast. Thank you all so much for joining us. If we missed any players, be sure to let us know at AnotherDolphinsPodcast@gmail.com. Thank you all so much for joining us. Football is back. The Miami Dolphins play football today. Go enjoy it, at least the first half. Hopefully you'll see some players who are going to have an impact this season. And then following the game, go have a great weekend. We will talk to you on the other side. Till then, fins up.
Football's back, baby. Enjoy it. Fins up.
Fins up.